What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it's Thursday, which means it is time for our weekly redraft. We have done 2020, 2019, 2018, and today we're looking at 2017. These guys are all between the ages of 24 and 25 at this point. So I have multiple NHL seasons. Basically, everybody that I ended up going with have at least 3 full NHL seasons under the book. And these guys are entering their prime for the most part at that 24, 25-year-old. And this was a very good draft overall. Looking at the original order, Nico Heer, Nolan Patrick, Miro Heiskanen, Cale Makar, Elias Pettersson, Cody Glass, Elias Anderson, Casey Mittelstadt, Michael Rasmussen, and Owen Tippett. So two busts, 2 kind of disappointments in Cody Glass and Rasmussen. But besides that, a very solid overall top 10 in this draft on the whole was very good. In terms of honorable mentions for the number 10 spot, number 10 spot is going to be a little bit contentious. I do like the guy that I do have at number 10. I'm going to defend him, but you could have gone with guys like Owen Tippett, who originally did go top 10. I ended up not going with him. Philip Hedl before his injury would have been a decent shout at number 10. Martin Necas, Josh Norris, Gabe Vilardi, Mittelstadt, Tolvanen, Mikey Anderson, Stuart Skinner all have cases to potentially be in that number 10 spot where Owen Tippett initially went, but I ended up going with Drake Batherson. This guy went 121st overall originally, so an absolute steal for the Ottawa Senators in the 4th round. His first season was in that COVID-shortened 2021 season, posted a very solid 34 points. Then the following season had 44 points in 46 games, really broke out. Not a point per game player anymore, but the last 2 seasons has 100 points in 126 games, good for around 65-point pace. Not afraid to throw the body around. Last year, I believe he had around 110 hits. So when looking at Drake Batherson, just a very good second liner, maybe even a first liner. I think he gets very much overlooked when it comes to that Ottawa forward core. You think about guys like Stützle and Tkachuk, but Drake Batherson is an absolute stud in his own right. And if he ended up going to the Florida Panthers, obviously their forward core would have been absolutely loaded. And the fact that he did break out in that shortened 2021 season, he probably wouldn't have ended up getting traded at the deadline for Claude Giroux, which ended up kind of being a disaster of a deal. They gave up Owen Tippett in their 2024 first-round pick, which is going to be pretty late. But Drake Batherson would have fit very nicely on that Florida Panthers forward core, a very physical, a good mix of physicality and skill all their forwards have for the most part. So I really would have liked to see Drake Batherson potentially be on the Florida Panthers. 9th overall, Michael Rasmussen originally went to the Detroit Red Wings. I have them going with Jake Ottinger. They get their franchise goalie back in 2017 instead of using the 16th overall pick in 2021 on a Sebastian Cossa. 2023 used a pretty early second-round pick to get Trey Augustine. They lock up their goaltender of the future, Jake Ottinger. Before this season was looking like a top 7 goalie in the entire NHL, getting better every single year. He posted a 9-11 in his first year, then a 9-14, played around 55 games. Last year in 63 games, had a 9-19. Has kind of had a down year overall this year, all the way down to a 900 and a 3.04, but he still is very young. I still think that he's going to be a top 10 goalie for most of his prime. Will he ever end up winning that goddamn Vezina trophy? I don't know, but if Detroit, although Alex Lyon has kind of emerged as a potential stud, but Detroit would have been in a much better situation regarding their rebuild if they ended up solidifying the goaltender position at 9th overall in this 2017 draft. 8th overall, Casey Mittelstadt, who is having a fantastic season for the Buffalo Sabres, but I have them taking Jeremy Swayman, back-to-back goalies going in the top 10. Can you believe that? Jeremy Swayman, obviously Buffalo. They did eventually get Devin Levi, but Jeremy Swayman has turned into a top 10 and this year top 5 goalie in the entire NHL. First season, similarly to Ottinger, had the first 2 years massive improvement, 9-14, then a 9-20 last year. He's only gotten better this year. He has a 9-24, and he's the 1A this year compared to last year. He was more like the 1B. Right now, he is on my Vezina ballot. He has been fantastic. So when you look at Buffalo, maybe they end up putting it all together before Eichel ended up getting traded, and they kind of blew it up. If they had a Jeremy Swayman in the system, potentially ready to go back in like 2020 or 2021. So I have Jeremy Swayman going to the Buffalo Sabres. 7th overall, this is when it gets very close. We're going back to centers. 7th overall, originally Elias Anderson went to the New York Rangers. Massive bust. They somehow traded like a second-round pick to dump him to the LA Kings, I believe, so they got out of it pretty well. But 7th overall was Anderson. I have them taking Nick Suzuki. Nick Suzuki has really taken that next step in terms of defensively this year. He's like top 10 in the entire league in terms of even strength defense. He always got hyped up as this fantastic defensive player, but the underlying numbers didn't really back that, in part because Montreal was a pretty dog shit team, but Nick Suzuki really is taking that next step defensively. And in terms of offense, I don't think he's ever going to be 85 points, but I think he can consistently be around 70-ish points like he is right now. So when looking at the New York Rangers, obviously, anything's an upgrade over Elias Anderson, but when looking at Nick Suzuki, he would have formed a really good center duo with a Mika Zibanejad. Mika Zibanejad, kind of all offense, power play merchant a little bit. Suzuki to kind of balance him out, have that 1-2 combo, be able to match up pretty interesting against other teams, having that defensive center and having that offensive center. So I think the New York Rangers going center here is probably the right play for them, considering there's no other elite potential defenseman that they could have taken back then. 6th overall, another center, originally Cody Glasswin here. I have them taking Robert Thomas. He's really blossomed into one of the best playmakers, and we already knew that he was one of the best passers in the entire NHL. He has 17 goals, 35 assists for 52 points this year, on pace for around 85, 86 this year. And just when looking at Robert Thomas, again, he's just such a fantastic passer. He doesn't play with a lot of talent in St. Louis. He does have Cairo, but he has to drive a lot of most of the time he has to drive the offense on his line, and he's been able to do that at a pretty high rate. 2 years ago, 77 points in 72 games. Last year, a bit of a down year, 65 and 73. That's a down year for him when the Blues were a pretty god-awful team, especially once they sold at the deadline. So I think going forward, Robert Thomas is going to be a legit 85 to 90 point guy. And when looking at him this year, he's goal scoring a shit ton more. His shooting percentage is about the same, but he has 17 goals in 49 games. His career high right now in terms of goals is 20. So he's going to cruise past that. His game is just ever expanding. We always knew that he was this elite passer, but his overall offensive play driving and even his defensive game has came a long way to the point where he's fringe top 15 center in the entire league. I'm not sure he's ever going to get to top 10, but that's like, if you're top 10 center, you're a top 20 overall player in the entire league. So when looking at Robert Thomas, definitely keeps on developing. For the Vegas Golden Knights, Robert Thomas did come into the league a year earlier than Nick Suzuki, so I think that also does help his case going over a Nick Suzuki. Right out of the gate, he was around a half a point per game center back in 2018, 2019. So Vegas gets Robert Thomas, a guy that could help them early on in their inception and be their future franchise. Maybe they don't have to go out and trade for, although they did end up winning the Stanley Cup, maybe they don't have to end up trading for a Jack Eichel, and Robert Thomas is that guy last year that helps lead them to the goddamn Stanley Cup. 5th overall, Elias Pettersson. They absolutely killed this pick. I have them going with Nico Heer. They still get their franchise center. Heischer's definitely having a bit of a down year after last year's 81 points. Goddamn Selke runner-up, but he's still on pace for 65 points. He's still one of the best defensive centers in the entire league, although his defensive numbers have dipped a little bit. I still think going forward, Nico Heischer is going to be around the 75, 80 point guy, as well as being one of the best defensive centers in the entire league. So when you look at that, no Pettersson, but they would still have technically their franchise center. And I do go him over a Robert Thomas because he was a far more impact player right out of the gate with the New Jersey Devils. He was second in on the goddamn team his first year with the Devils, 52 points right out of the gate with that Taylor Hall heart-winning year. So he was immediately ready to enter the league. So when looking at it for the Vancouver Canucks, I think they take Nico Heischer over a Robert Thomas or a Nick Suzuki. Nico Heischer, the track record is so there as being a fantastic two-way guy. I think they go Heischer. 4th overall, Cale Makar ended up going in this slot. This might be controversial. I have them taking Jason Robertson. It was obviously between him and his potential other teammate. I have them going with Jason Robertson. Obviously, they would like to take a defenseman here. If there was a defenseman maybe a notch below Jason Robertson, maybe they go defenseman here, but there's really not in this redraft. There's no other elite defenseman besides the two that are going to be in the top two. So I think they go with the best player available, although do they really need another goddamn winger? When looking at it, it would form like the greatest line of all time. A Jason Robertson, Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen line would be absolutely disgusting. Jason Robertson has obviously flourished into one of the best players in the entire league. 109 points this year, has been a little bit of a dip this year, only 50 points in 49 games. His defensive numbers has been fantastic, but I think when looking at Colorado, they add yet another fantastic forward to their core with this deal, although they'd have to figure out the defenseman spot somewhere else. I think they go with the best player available, and clearly at 4th overall with the options left, it is by far Jason Robertson. 3rd overall, though, Miro Heiskanen stays at 3rd overall. I think this comes down to team fit when looking at Dallas. Not saying they don't need Jason Robertson. Jason Robertson's a massive piece, but when looking at Dallas, especially the last 4 to 5 years, they were severely lacking that number one defenseman that Miro Heiskanen has been. If you removed Miro Heiskanen, first off, they don't go to the Cup final in 2020. That's without saying. Miro Heiskanen had 26 points in 27 games during that Cup final. But overall, unless I can't deem Thomas Harley a legit future number one. So when looking at it, Miro Heiskanen is by far the best defenseman on Dallas. You look at their forwards. Back in 2017, they still had Ben and Sagan playing at a high level. They had Rupe Hintz, who they drafted in 2015. I think removing Miro Heiskanen from this team the previous 5 years that he was on the team, because he walked into the league at 2018, 2019, and was already a top 30 defenseman in the entire NHL. His second year finished 12th in the goddamn Norris. Jason Robertson wasn't even playing in the NHL then. So when looking at it, I think he is, in terms of value and positional importance on the Dallas Stars, they needed that number one defenseman more than they needed another forward back in 2017 and over the past 6 years as well. And especially going forward, if they had to choose between Miro Heiskanen and Jason Robertson, especially because contracts, Miro Heiskanen has a fantastic contract for many, many years. But I think they end up choosing Miro Heiskanen here. 2nd overall was Nolan Patrick. Unfortunately, kind of had his career cut short because of injuries. And instead, we have them taking Elias Pettersson. My bad. I almost said Lindholm right there. Sorry. Thinking about Canucks, thinking about trades. Pettersson has obviously been fantastic this year after last year fully breaking out with 102 points. Due to the Philadelphia Flyers, are their trajectory that much better over the last 6 years if they have Pettersson instead of Patrick? I honestly don't think so. I think they'd probably be in the same position because they were just a mess the last 5 or 6 years with Chuck Fletcher. But Pettersson obviously goes 2nd overall in this redraft, considering he walked into the league 2018, 2019, was immediately a point per game, fantastic two-way defenseman, and has only gotten better and has become a top 15 player in the entire NHL, especially the last 2 years. Going forward, one of the best centers in the entire league, probably a top 10 guy that you would build your franchise around right now. So they go with Pettersson. And then at number 1, Nico Heer obviously went 1st overall. I have them taking Cale Makar, best defenseman of our generation. I think that kind of goes without saying. He probably would have won the Norris Trophy the past 3 years if he played every single game. He missed 11 games back in that COVID season. He missed 22 games last year, was still a goddamn finalist. He has been the best defenseman the last 3 years. People saying that Quinn Hughes is better than Cale Makar. I don't think anybody's really saying that, but like that's laughable, even though Quinn Hughes is having a fantastic all-time season. Cale Makar is still the best defenseman. Best skating defenseman I've seen in my entire life. Best shot on a defenseman that I've seen just overall in terms of accuracy, and especially with his wrist shot. He is just so dynamic, so amazing, and I think he, without a doubt, goes 1st overall in this redraft. But here's the final. Makar to the Devils, Pettersson to the Flyers, Heiskanen still to the Stars, Robertson to the Avs, Heischer to the Canucks, Thomas to the Knights, Suzuki to the Rangers, Swayman to the Sabres, Ottinger to the Wings, and then Batherson to the Panthers. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? And I'll be seeing the next one.